these three assumptions, I'm going to finish very, very quickly. These three assumptions I explore in the book. Assumptions about the nature of practice, about the life and organisation of place, and about the value of our expert interventions. And I do it in various ways, but I shall skip all of that. In the first part, it's all about learning. What can we learn from what we've done? In the second part, I tell a few stories about what it means to unravel this process. And I might just tell you one very quick one about the school bus, maybe one about the pickle jar. I told people earlier. There I was in community, two little stories about the school bus. And I was talking to communities about their big concern with just one of these participatory exercises, which is how to get the school bus in to collect the kids in one of these settlements of very narrow streets. They couldn't get in, so that the women wouldn't have to spend, I don't know how long, to take the kids to where the bus actually stopped, which is about a half-an-hour road, before they could actually get right. So they're losing income in so doing so. Kids to go on their own, unsafe. We were worried about how do we get, and we were talking like mad, and they were going, well, we're going to have to widen the streets. But my goodness, we'll widen the streets, they're going to be, at least 10 families are going to have to move in order to make space. But maybe we can do it this way. Where would they move to? We need more land. It unraveled in a very complex way. Suddenly somebody at the back of the room put up their hands. It's a community group, and he said, why do we keep talking about getting the school bus in? Why can't we talk about getting the kids out? And it's a good idea, right? And in the vote, a very different set of responses. And two really interesting ones that we've used in different places. One is, getting the kids out meant somehow searching for a way in which people already operating in the community could serve, in a sense, as school bus drivers. In one context, in Bangladesh, we mobilized bicycle rickshaws that carry 6 children at a time. Kids decorated the bus with their own initiative, put their names on it, a very personal thing. The rickshaw driver would care for them and so on. And I tell you, when it came to Fridays or Saturdays or whenever the day off, there were rickshaw races on the open ground to see which community beats which community amongst the kids. That was a partnership. It was not a voluntary thing, all right? These guys were part-time rickshaw drivers already, employed by the Education Authority as school bus drivers. So they were being paid to create income. It created work in the community in the sense of there were welders and so on that made the larger rickshaw things at the back for the kids to shelter and all that stuff that you know. So there was income, there was ownership, there was security. It released time for families to be able to engage with their work much better. It released the stress and insecurity if the kids had to go on their own and so on. So that's one example of a story that began to look at practical intervention that had all kinds of strategic value and that could be sustained by both the way which integrated and owned by the community, reducing the dependency on the state in that way. But the second one was also about the bus drivers, where we didn't use any mobilized form. We borrowed an idea that kind of where it was from, and it was called the pied bus. Yes, the local authority hired bus drivers, but they didn't drive anything. They walked groups of children to school. Now, one of the interesting things that I find in most of my community planning is how can we engage with children in the planning process? Using the old jargon word, how can we actually give them a voice? They know a lot more than some of our adults know about who's owning which property, why the playground is absolutely clean, but the basketball court is vandalized, why the community centre is empty, and so on. So there was one person for every about 6, I can't remember, 8 children. The children would be walked to school. As they would walk to school, the learning would start from the point of leaving the house to the school. They would learn about their walk, what was on their walk. They would do risk assessments. They would understand. We would occasionally walk. They would walk and say, right, today we're going to walk and we're going to identify issues of insecurity. You tell us where you don't think it's safe. Right? The puddle, the house that's got a funny door on it, which is a bit scary, and so on and so forth. Yeah? Equally, we were working in a community that was quite divided ethnically, and the best way of crossing barriers is again with children. So we would take different walks to school every occasion. We would cross the barriers. Why is this insecure? So the other community. So by the time they got to school, we would debrief, like you would do with any planners and all the rest of it, right? And you get a real sense of understanding. We then took one person from each of these bus groups and had them on the Community Planning Council, the local Community Planning Council. And each of them would select and volunteer every 3 months, I think it was, to actually sit on the Community Planning Council. So actually have the children engaged that way. That was, again, the strategic planning. And there are lots of stories like that in the book. There are stories about bus stops and so on. All right. In my final chapters, I unravel a series of basic principles. I write my own code of conduct, which I would prefer to share with you. There is, by the way, a chapter on teaching. How do we teach all this stuff? How do we bring in the classroom without oversimplifying? How do we encourage, in my view, in our education, the discomfort of uncertainty, which we know is a condition of practice? You know? How do you live with that? How do you live with the idea that you're going to have to act without knowing it all? Yeah? You can never know it all. You will always be what is often referred to as being optimally ignorant. Come back to that. All right, my code of conduct. This is my overhead PowerPoint presentation. Recognize your ignorance, all right? And very often it can be liberating. As I was saying to somebody the other day, I was never at my most creative when I was at my most naive. I did more at the time when I was working for the Great London Council because I had no idea how the planning system worked or what anything meant. All I knew was that I was ambitious enough to change things. Yeah? Leave space very often to think creatively. Very often, I like to think that we are a little bit like Plato's philosopher. We want to achieve a state in which, as I say, we're optimally. We know just about enough. We stand somewhere between knowing and not knowing. We know just enough to be able to be effective, but we know we can never know it all. And I hate these studies that go out there that spend 3 years trying to understand the place, gathering data, gathering statistics, interviewing people. And I was involved in one, I won't tell you by whom or where, in which it took 4 years to get the report out. And we all know that by the time the report came out, the data was, of course, out of date. So we had to go back and do more study and so on. Just great for the jobs. Never know it all. And in that sense, there's another nice analogy which I like. We're all like chess players. Right? You can imagine. My goodness, you get me going for another hour here. You've got to be careful with these kinds of questions. But if I was to be specific about the advice that I would give, would be imagine yourself almost like an urban detective. I often think of myself like an acupuncturist, somebody who goes around, an urban acupuncturist. I want to find that spot where I can touch and release the energy of place in order to fix itself with a bit of help, as it were. But if you start as an urban detective, look for clues. Right? What does the concept of community centre mean? I know what it means to me. I visited one centre almost been a couple of years ago in Sri Lanka. Beautiful building, absolutely delightful. Wonderful materials and all the rest of it. And I couldn't figure out why it was empty. I walked in there and there was one room that was entitled Theory Room. What is a theory room in a rural village? This was actually in a rural village. And the other one was meeting room. Right? Communities don't meet like that around a table, chairs like this. Where did you pay for these chairs anyway? Right? Completely empty. Once I started discussing, and my Buffalo example that I give here, we were talking to a family, and I was looking for clues of what the concept of community centre was. Yeah? I saw these, it was peculiar to see these buffaloes, drooped ears, they were all nice things. And I discovered that actually there was an NGO that gave one buffalo to I don't know how many families in order to help with their livelihoods, because the buffalo is wonderful in terms of its milk and its cream, it's very productive. And in discussion with them, they said to me, we were discussing about all sorts of things, not community centres. But I asked them about the community centre down the road. Who owns it? So the NGO put it up. And we can't use it because it's locked until they arrive. That's a great community centre. Beautiful building. Hopeless. And so we started a discussion about community centre. So, well, groups of families have talked to each other, and we thought, well, if we can actually get the buffalo in one place, there are 6 at the moment, we can begin to develop enterprises around it. The buffalo curd is sold to the tourists. The curd comes in pots. The women make pots, as the potting industry goes on. That's part of the community centre. They also cover the curd when it goes with nice little cloths that are woven. Right? So fantastic added value in terms of another enterprise. And the dung of the buffalo, they said, is fantastic. You dry it, it's a great fuel. I tell you what we've done, we've had a little perfume. turn it into a coil, so that it actually can be used as a mosquito repellent. Oh my goodness, this is fantastic stuff. Let alone the milk and all the rest of it and so on. Right? In one place, their milk could be enhanced. So apparently buffaloes have a very long gestation period in terms of their calves and so on. I don't know much about it, but all sorts of benefits came. The concept of a community centre emerged. It was actually an urban farm to start with, which we then embellished, and the story is in the Placemakers, because this was a place also with people who went to market. And one of the things that happened at the marketplace, they would often stay the night, talking to the market traders. They wanted a little trolley with a wheel and sleep in. So one of our students designed out of recycled materials, a little trolley, the top of which comes up so that one person can sleep. And we thought, my goodness, yes, let's make this the community centre out of recycled materials. And we did. And we showed how this little frame on wheels could be clad in different ways. That cladding could actually be used for your house. Now, look what you can do with Coke cans. Look what you do. With designers, so the thing didn't look like rubbish at the end of the day. It looked like a pretty good piece of design. My God, it raised the status. Right? So then we took this little trolley and turned it into a mobile tool unit. It would roam around so as anybody wants to borrow some tools to fix things, and it became a little resource centre on this little thing. And on and on. That was the community centre. It was an enterprise, it was owned, it was profitable, and it was used. Look for clues. Start with what is going on. Get the concept of community centre from people locally. That's my advice. Pretend, role play. I am going to be for a day an urban detective. Then you can design a great building. Still doesn't stop you designing it yourself like what's happened to the building. Design a beautiful urban farm. Gorgeous thing. The Placemakers. What the heck does it mean? He didn't actually ask you that way. Good question. Importance is not only the Placemakers, but the subtitle that you can't see there. It's actually called The Placemaker's Guide to Building Community. And I had a lot of discussion with the publisher who said Placemakers is not a word. It's two words, placemakers. Otherwise it's not a dictionary. I said, no, that doesn't work. Because I'm actually referring to people who do it, rather than some organisation that fixes up places. Well, we got into semantic discussion. My view is two things. One, Placemakers is inclusive of everyone who creates places that make spaces for community development. And that space is sometimes economic space, it's sometimes political space, it's organizational space, enterprise space, and so on. Right? And that's my bias. My bias has always been, because I'm an architect, to start with place, with local things, and see what's happening, what the concept of place is, in that sense, and then move to the strategic agenda from there. Hence, building community. And building community is, at the end of the day, at the core of our activity. Because without community, we can't get into all the other activities that we get. So, the Placemaker's Guide is anyone who's active in making places that sustain life and livelihoods. Because otherwise it just becomes a formal activity. I have great discussions with my architectural colleagues about that. I've made a wonderful place over there. Yeah, but you're not a placemaker. No, but I'm an architect. Yes, but you're not a placemaker. That beautiful place has not made space for all the other enterprise activities. So, if it served one function, it has begun to worry a few